Okay, first thing I wanted to say is that in the description of this video, you'll find links to all the different files that I reference and or the videos that I reference in this video. If you follow my channel for any amount of time, you'd know that the description of my videos are pretty important because they reference either newer videos that replace the one that you're watching and or the files that are important to the video or have been updated since that video. So I recommend everyone that goes to my videos just checks out the description. But let's get to the point of this video here. JP was kind enough to send me his Xbox One X, as you can see here. But what I have in front of me here is an Xbox OG model. And the reason I have this is that when I last had an Xbox One X, and I had basically upgraded to 2 terabytes, a couple of people had mentioned the boot animation on the X was different than the OG and the S models, and could you transfer it to the older models? And I was a bit bummed because I didn't have the system on me anymore, and I didn't make a copy of the boot animation files. So now that I have the system again, it was an opportunity to try that again. And so what I want to show you is what happens if you transfer the boot animation. It's actually boot.anim.dat from an X to an OG model. So let's get this started up so you can see what happens. So there you go. So it is possible to transfer the Xbox One X boot animation over to the older models, as you can see there. I'll just let that finish booting up. Now this isn't the most practical modification because it requires you taking your hard drive out and then copying the boot.anim.dat file over to your A and B folders on the system update partition. I'll link in the description basically that video I made about restoring your boot animation on your Xbox One. And it's the same process for the OG, the S, and the X models. So there you go. I thought that was kind of neat, even though it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do or the most practical thing to do. And I'm not sure if it'll go away in the future, so I'm guessing that with the next system update, we'll actually put the original boot.anim.dat file back, or the one that's intended for your system back. So this may only last as long as your next update. But it's possible that if it sees the file in place, it leaves it alone. So we'll see. If it does leave it alone, this opens up the door to custom boot animations in the future. So we'll see what that leads to. But the other thing I wanted to cover in this video really quickly is some of the future videos that I have coming up. As I mentioned, I have this Xbox One X in hand, and I'm going to make a couple different videos. This was sent to me because the customer wanted to upgrade it to a 5 terabyte drive, which should be great. But a couple of things I wanted to do. He also asked me to change out the thermal paste, so I'll do a video on that on the Xbox One X. I know a couple of people have done it, but I'll do it in my own overly talky style. But the other thing that I want to do with this is some speed tests. Now, in this, again, in the description of this video, I have a link to a video someone made on November 9th. I think the Xbox One X released on the 24th of November of 2017 or 22nd, something like that. So this video was made a couple weeks before the retail release of the Xbox One X. Now that's significant because the Xbox One X dev units, development units, and or the early units they gave to reviewers had SSD drives in them. On the retail units, they don't have SSDs. They actually have this model drive here. I don't know if you can read that. But this is a 1 terabyte HDD. There's nothing particularly special about this drive. It's a 5400 RPM drive. This is the model number here, but I'll also show you a close-up of the drive. And so you'll see that it's available on Amazon. There's nothing particularly special about this drive. But the reason I point this out is the video that I'm referencing shows that an external attached SSD is as fast as the internal hard drive for the Xbox One X, which is not true for retail units. So if you saw that video, and again, the reason I mentioned that is when I did my 2 terabyte upgrade on my Xbox One X, someone had said, oh, that was that wasn't the smartest thing to do because the 1 terabyte drive that ships with the X is as fast as a drive you could use. It runs as fast as an SSD. But again, if you're basing it on these early dev units, that isn't true. So to prove that, what I'm going to do is a video of speed timings. So I'm going to do system boot up, and then I'm going to load up 3 games. And I'm going to do the 1 terabyte drive that the system shipped with, and then I'm going to do a 2 terabyte SSHD. So this is one of those hybrid drives. This is a 2 terabyte drive, but it also has 8 gigabytes of SSD storage on it. So, and this will be a little unique to all my other tests. So I'll boot the system up 3 times and then show you the 3rd time. Same thing with the games. I'll load the games up 3 times and time the 3rd time, because the way these work is commonly used files get stored in the SSD storage. But after that, I'm going to do, this is a 4 terabyte drive. So I'm going to upgrade to 5 terabyte, but I'm doing a 4 terabyte because I have a lot more of these on hand. And I'm going to do a speed test versus an S and an OG. So I want to refrain from having to make as many copies as possible. As it is, I've had to copy this drive 3 times, because the last thing I'm going to test is a 256 gigabyte SSD. This is a Lite-On Dell drive. It's a pretty crappy drive, really, but in terms of SSDs, it's not the fastest. But I'm going to also use this as the external drive. So we'll be able to do a direct comparison of this SSD attached internally versus externally. Now, part of the reason I'm doing this is, as I mentioned, the dev units had an M.2, so it's basically a card slot interface for the hard drives, whereas this has a SATA port. So those M2 can be PCI Express. They can also be SATA. If it's PCI Express, it's even faster than SATA. So the point is, if this is a SATA 2 or a SATA 3, we should be able to determine that by the speed of the SSD. I don't suspect it'll be as fast internally as it will be externally, but if they're about even, then, or as close to even as possible, then this is SATA 3. If it tests out about the same as my S and my OG tests, then this is still SATA 2. So we'll see. I don't really know the answer to it, because I feel like a lot of the videos out there can't be trusted because they don't even open the box for the speed test that they do. One other thing to mention, and I'll show you a quick picture of that. So this 4 terabyte drive, or the 5 terabytes or the 3 terabytes, are 15 millimeter drives, whereas basically the drive that ships with the system and the SSHD and the SSDs are all 7 millimeter drives. Now, normally that wouldn't be too big of a deal in the OG and the S models, since the hard drive has its own space and it has plenty of height above the drive. It's fine to use these larger 15 millimeter drives. But in the X, I'll show you a picture here, they stack the optical disk drive or the Blu-ray drive over these hard drives, and I'll show you what happens. Basically, there's enough room to fit a 15 millimeter drive, but the optical disk drive, the Blu-ray drive, sits directly on top of this. There's absolutely no space. And the problem with that is there's these little air holes. Let's see, on here it's right there. They call it a breather hole. And you don't have that on SSD, but you do have that on all these spindle drives. And you have it on this model here as well. So the problem with that is that the drive won't be able to breathe if you put the optical disk drive directly on top. So a solution that I have, which is also from a comment that someone made on my Xbox One X video, which is to basically remove this tray. So there's basically there's 2 stacked trays like so. The hard drive screws directly into the top tray, and then this tray screws into the bottom of the case. So what you do is you basically remove this tray, you keep this plastic tray screwed into the hard drive, and then you directly use these fatter head screws to basically attach this tray directly to the casing. So the only thing you're missing out on is this tray here, but this gives you a few millimeters here. I'd say at least 4 millimeters of additional space, and I'll show you what that looks like all mounted. And gives you plenty of room to basically put a 5 terabyte drive in the system. And then with my speed tests of the 1 terabyte versus the 5 terabyte, or 4 terabyte rather, I'll show you whether or not you actually lose any speed by using a larger drive. So everything's sort of related here, and this will easily give me a few more videos to make for you guys. And I think it'll be really interesting. And I think, again, this will be YouTube first. I don't think there is anyone that's put a Xbox One X boot animation onto an OG system. And I don't know anyone that's done a speed test of basically internal drives on any of the Xbox models. And I'll be doing it on all 3. So again, let me show you really quick that boot up one more time. I do think this is pretty neat, even if it isn't the most practical thing. But I will make an update if the next time I do an update, or next time an update is released, to see if this boot animation remains. So let me just show you this one more time. And then you guys can look forward to future videos. There you go. So I don't know if I'll be the person to do it, but I would be curious about those bootanim.dat, the type of video file it actually is, to see if we could produce our own. It's also worth mentioning that the bootanim that comes with the OG and the S models is only 32 megabytes in size, where the Xbox One X file is 64 megabytes in size. And they'll all be linked in my file trip. Well, they'll be linked in the video below, but I put it on file trip and I also put it on Google Drive. All right, guys, so see you in my next videos.